My guest today is Mr. Cole Rodgers, founder of the School of Man. What a great name for a 12-week mental and physical toughness planner that claims to build leaders, strengthen family ties, and help you win mentally, physically, and financially. They even tout it will improve your sex life. This all sounds like a love language and lesson for men folk who often find no place in our civilized world for their warrior spirit. Through Cole's own experiences of admiring wrongly stoic, masculine, and often confusing male role models, substance abuse, skewed career goals, and too many one-night stands, Cole hit bottom, so to speak. This is when Cole went soul-searching and through hard work discovered what was really missing in his life and what it really means to be a man. Thrilled with his newfound knowledge and self-awareness, he founded the School of Man, a man's guide to living, loving, and legacy. I love the alliteration. And he has authored a book on the subject. He admits his techniques are simple, but it is the willingness to start and the execution that is hard. This is where School of Man comes in to support, motivate, and hold you accountable, not just physically, but emotionally too. It is my pleasure to welcome to the table the 21st century warrior, educator, author, and family man, Mr. Cole Rodgers.
Wow.
Did I read your book right?
Spot on.
I know, and let me tell you, there are
You've done this once or twice.
Almost 300 times.
Almost
you were
300
listening.
times.
So there were so many quotes. Let me show you what I did to your book. There were so many fun quotes in this book that I just went kind of cuckoo with dog-earing it, yellow highlighters, pens. So I'm going to just start the show off with an excerpt from the book on page 39 at the end of chapter 6. I'm just going to read it. I know I read the intro and y'all are like, Kerry, quit reading. But I'm going to read this just to get it started. This is Cole's words that he wrote on page 39 at the end of chapter 6. I wanted to find a way to tell men that if they want to be better in their lives, they have to choose it. They have to ask for the ball. They have to seek out the hard and embrace the struggle. They have to understand that everything is a test and that these tests are not open book. They can choose comfort for their lives, but it will make them soft and eager for a shortcut, which will eventually cause them to dig out masks out of the closets. In the end, I want to assure men that if they can truly man up and choose themselves, their being, their business, their body, their family, then they'll be able to design their own lives rather than having someone else or something else design it for them. The way I've found to tell as many men as possible and have them not only hear what I'm saying, but also embrace what I'm saying is through the School of Man. There it is, right there, in a nutshell. So the book's written in 3 parts. Part 1's your history.
Mm-hmm.
Part 2, starting the School of Man. And part 3 is life, love, and legacy. So let's start with part 1. You are open about your weaknesses and claim owning your weaknesses and working on them is a strength, though often the opposite is thought to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us your story and how that revelation came to be.
So, the common narrative is find your strength. Right, there's a great book out there called Strength Finders, and go all in on your strengths. And I do believe in that mentality, that strategy. However, when you're an alpha like me, and when you're on the unhealthy side, because all of us as men who are looking to achieve, to accomplish, to leave the world a better place, to make memories with our family, we're searching for one thing. It's a very common thing. It's something that blood has been shed over for thousands and thousands of years. It's freedom, right? So it's freedom and liberation. And it was funny that a couple weeks ago we held an event here. Men and their families came in from across the country, and it's called Rebirth. It was Rebirth 2.0. One of the men that were there, he was incarcerated for 9 years in prison, right? And the room is full. 100+ men, etc. And it's a very intimidating environment. And you could tell that he was he was trying to pull himself away, and or he was struggling to come to grips with, like, how do I measure up? Because that's what we've been taught. We've been taught as men to measure ourselves on three things since we were kids: athletics, the woman we chase, and power, aka money. And if you can check all three boxes, society tells you you're doing really good things as a man. But the facts are, and I'm going back to this story with Cody, that after we got finished in the first morning and he felt somewhat intimidated, I told him flat out, I said, we've got over 100 men here that have imprisoned themselves. They don't have to be behind bars. They don't have to be behind a wall. They walk around hiding in plain sight. I've been that man. I mean, slavery, although has been abolished, quote unquote abolished, it's still around. We do it to ourselves, men, women, children, all of us, because that's what society wants, and that's what we buy into through limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, right, self-doubt, etc., whatever you want to call it. And that's what I told Cody. I said, men in here are seeking for one thing, like we're all seeking since the beginning of time, and that's freedom and liberation. The only way you get there, though, is truly owning your flaws and understanding that you're a perfectly flawed man, and that everything that has been given to you in life has happened for you and not to you. And that's the truth. And it takes a lot of pain distilled into purpose, which equates to your promise to the world, to get to that place to say that. Because going back to the three benchmarks, and like I was talking to Cody and to the group, and it resonated with everybody, of course, is that is a constant evolution throughout life. You don't just come to this realization that, boom, I'm liberated and I'm perfectly flawed, so the world's going to give me what I'm asking for it. No. You have to actually put what you have earned, and I call it paying the tuition, all the scars, all the people that you've hurt, right? The person that you've lied to in the mirror for your entire life and fed yourself these lies and called it caviar. You have to eventually convert that and distill it into, yes, this stuff has happened for me, not to me. How can I best use it as being an instrument of impact? Instead of wearing a mask on top of a mask on top of a mask. And in particular, in the world that I operate in, as being an entrepreneur, 3 businesses, in production, in sales, creating, moving society forward, that's what the greats have always done. You're expected to always perform at a certain level. And that's really where my story was unfolding, is that I'm blessed in the sense that I've gotten to be in a family with my mother and father who are married to this day and are in love to this day. It's one thing to love someone. It's another thing to fall in love with someone over and over and over again. And that's the truth. And as a kid, when I was born, I almost died due to meningitis. So I was born a fighter, because as men, that's what we were all created to be, as a fighter at the end of the day, in the most positive ways. And I'm not talking about going downrange or in war, but you dig your boots in and you create a stand, and you will never fall for anything once you stand for something. But throughout my life, I've been fortunate to be around a family that what a marriage looks like. I've been fortunate enough to also see how you are to operate, the value systems, the character that you build. But over time, because we are told how to be, how to act, what to do, institutions do a great job of it. And today's, I would say, messaging really does a great job of telling you how you should be and how you should act, and do this, don't do that, so on and so forth. You start buying into it. And you start buying into the narrative of what your little circle looks like, because it's called, it's the law of the mirror. Your network equals your net worth. And all of a sudden, as a young man, you start developing these insecurities over time. Maybe it is that you're not as athletic as somebody, or maybe it is that you're just constantly in comparison mode, because we're good at that.
And when you first start out, you're dealing with uncertainties as a young man
100%.
Because you've got all these, what did you call them, expectations put on you
Yes.
by society. So you're getting out of college and you're about to go thinking, I got to get let me see. First of all, I think I remember you had your heart broken in college.
I did. That was the first time I ever experienced that. And that also, because of the energy that God has given me, I can use it for good or I can use it for bad.
And you picked the latter.
Yes, I did. I mean, but it was a part of my path. This is a part of my path and my story. And, in college, I remember getting my heart broken, and I was saving myself from marriage. That didn't happen. She broke my heart, and at that point, it sent me on a spiral and on a rampage. I would never let anybody get close to me until my wife, Ashley, which was about 12 years later.
Wow.
Yeah, so 1.4, 1.6 GPA. I remember my dad looking at me saying, "You might be the smartest dumbass I know." Yeah. And, that woke me up because I really, as a young man and as men in general, we get the addiction that I see most men dealing with, even as they go through life, is validation. They're always seeking for validation. Like my emotions, my well-being is always dependent upon what you say to me. Like, I need you to give me an attaboy, right?
Yes.
And that's where I was in my life, and I got tired of living that, and that's really what creates a self-sabotaging loop that we see so much in the most successful people out there, and self-doubt. But at that same time in college, I picked up Adderall, and it was one of those things. Adderall was just making its way. And I've drank more whiskey than I can remember. As a senior in high school, I wasn't known as the captain of the basketball team or the baseball team. I was known as the guy that had 7 kegs.
But you were also those other two things?
Yes.
Oh, but that's not what you're known for. Okay.
Yeah. It was one of those things that I knew myself and my buddies were known as, hey, those are the guys that could throw the best parties. And that's what I wanted to be known for, honestly.
So how old were you when you started on Adderall?
I was 18, 19. And then that turned into, just like, I'm 38 years young, my generation turned that into a party drug, right? It was used to cram for tests. And at that same time, it was used for us to stay up until 5 in the morning and go to the Cowboy and everything else and run the gamut Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
And then as I graduated, I did bring up my GPA. It felt good. And I had someone that was a mentor in college that said, look, it's not about your grades. It's about the process. It's about achieving something that you think's impossible. And I did at that time. That's how limited my thinking was and how small my thinking was. But I always wanted to do something great. And the first book I ever read was 12 Pillars. Can't even remember the lady's name that laid it on my desk. And it's by Jen Marone. And it changed my perspective on everything. And going back to expectations, the quickest way to disappointment is through setting an unrealistic expectation for yourself or someone else, for that matter. And as I graduated, Adderall was basically like a Skittle. You went from eating it, you went to crushing it, to snorting it, etc. So I knew I had to get out of Central Arkansas, so I took a job in Nashville, Tennessee. But I brought all these habits with me, in particular all the insecurities, in particular just this false sense of identity. But that's what we've been taught to do, right? But
you were successful there, right?
Very successful, yes.
What were you doing there?
So I started off in sales. I was working for an affiliate for an insurance carrier, one of the most brand name insurance carriers out there. And my first starting job, my salary was $18,000. And I'll never forget that the shower the room I was in, I had a picture in the shower of my goals. And I always had my goals on my steering wheel, and everywhere I went.
I don't think that's the picture most guys have in their shower.
Yeah.
No.
So, and people would kind of chuckle at me because I was such a goal-oriented, competitive man at the end of the day. I was 21, living in Nashville, Tennessee, single.
Snorting Adderall.
Yep. Traveling all of Tennessee because I worked in all the school districts there. And I've gotten to learn a lot of valuable lessons at that time. Especially how to deal with no. I would sit down with 25 people a day talking about their benefits, and 23 out of 25 were telling me no, right? Or some form of that. But that's where I learned a lot. I built those muscles of resiliency over time there. But throughout Nashville, living there for close to 5 years, that's also where I found cocaine.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was one of those things. I was never one to... And you would never know it. No one would ever know that side of me. And
you were wearing a mask.
100%.
High functioning addict or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
That's a very good way to put it. And every time I would look myself in the mirror, it's like over here professionally, I was moving the needle. And I would come back to Central Arkansas and I would make a point to buy everybody's drinks at Gasano's.
Yeah.
Right? Just because I wanted to feel like the man. Right? Even if I couldn't afford it at the time, but I wanted their approvals, like, oh, Cole's doing some great things. But fast forward, I knew I had to get out of Nashville, and that's when I moved to Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, where I met my wife. I was like, I've got to leave all this stuff behind.
You knew you'd gone too far.
And I had achieved what I wanted to achieve in a short amount of time at that time in my life, and in sales and becoming the number one sales guy in the organization and the rookie of the year. All those things were important to me, and achievement was my motivation, was my fuel for life. Like the more I achieved, I think that the more I would be happy, right? And that's where kind of things started unfolding for me. And I met Ashley at that time. I was 26, 27, and I met her on eHarmony. And this is how insecure I was. I would tell everybody I met her at Harris Teeter, the grocery store. And people were like, that really works? Because I didn't want to tell them I met her on a dating website, because I tell my buddies, like, oh, he can't pick up a girl.
Now it's opposite.
Yeah.
If you don't meet somebody on the internet, it's like, what? You can still do that?
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
But, and I was working 70, 80 hours a week, hated what I was doing, and I knew that was the time to get out. And I always told myself, when I'm not happy, it's time to make a change.
Did you meet her before you left Tennessee?
No,
That's why you went to North Carolina?
No. I met her in North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I met her in North Carolina, and at that time, she didn't know any of this. So, and as a man who's in that specific position, the number one thing I started going back to was lying to her.
Mm-hmm.
It was the easiest way to do it. It's like, just push the dirt under the rug.
There's something about lying and addicts that go together, even when you don't need to.
Yeah, and it was little white lies that started. That's how it always starts. Little micro fractures, right? And I had kicked those bad habits, put them at bay, but I could drink like a fish. If you're going to run with the boys at night, you better wake up with the men in the morning. And that's what was beat into me. And that's what I enjoyed doing at the time. And
did you just see why I loved his book? He has the best cliches. If you're going to run with the boys at night, you better wake up with the men in the morning. I've never heard that. Did you make that up?
No, my mentors have always said that. Like, if you're gonna hang out with the owls at night, you better be up here soaring with the eagles in the morning. Is the other way?
See?
Yeah. So
that's the way his whole book is.
Yeah. So like, if you're gonna run, your ass better be ready to go first thing when the sun's up. Right. Just know what you're getting into when you're getting into the lion's den. But I ended up leaving that career and coming over back to Little Rock, starting my business. I've always been in the insurance game, got into the consulting part of the world. So that's my core business. Love it so much. But Ashley and I did long distance for close to a year. And that's where, I knew. So I ended up taking a job, basically making half of what I was making. And we didn't have any children at the time. So it was a strategic move on my part, knowing I was going to 20X whatever I was going to do. Like, I'm not a quitter. You can't beat me at the end of the day. Only I can do that. But when she came over, I had blown my Achilles out right out of the gate.
Came over to Arkansas?
Yeah, so she ended up moving in Arkansas.
So you moved from Tennessee to Carolina, then to North Carolina, and then you moved from North Carolina to Arkansas.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Moved
you lived with her in North Carolina for
I
a
did.
year or something?
Yep,
okay.
A little bit over a year. And so we agreed she'd move over.
To Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. And so I blow out my Achilles, and 6 months later, like, I'm in the hospital for 5 days for staph infection.
Hey.
Yeah, we get married the next year. Time's running out. Money's running out. And the first night of a rehearsal dinner, back on Adderall, back on that train, because all I could think about was performance. How can I get more focus? How can I get more edge? How can I accelerate my growth? How can I accelerate it? Like, time is not moving fast or the results are not coming fast enough for me. Like, I was never one of those that I wanted to, the prescription pill game was really, really big with my generation in school. Mm-hmm. Like, that's really where it started, with the hydros and the Percocets, and I never was into that. And I would like come and go when it came to Adderall and when it came to drinking, etc. But I always wanted an edge. Like, that's just it. I wanted an edge. That's what I sought out. And we all have a dark side. You just have to understand how best to use that energy in the right areas. I don't care who it is. Everybody has a dark side that wants to come out and play. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that about everybody that's successful too. You just know how best to use it in the right areas. But rehearsal dinner.
You said in your book, you talked about your wedding day, that it was blissful, but you also called yourself, and I'm quoting what you called yourself in the book, a self-centered egomaniac, a narcissist who was struggling more than she, Ashley, could have known.
100%. Yeah. If she's in the car, if she came up here and she'd be like, yeah, 100%.
You said you didn't know how to be married.
No. And I mean, being a father, being married, none of that comes with a manual, at the time. Like, rehearsal, I mean, just to that point, we go out and party till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I knock on her door. I go to see her. I literally sit on the bed, and I was so drunk that I hit the bed and hit the floor.
This is the night before you got married?
Yeah, and then she was, of course, crying. And then the next day, the only way I could make it through it was drinking more and taking Adderall.
Oh, boy. What a great honeymoon night, I bet.
It gets even a little bit deeper than that. And then, then we go to Costa Rica, and
you sure you want to tell?
Well, no, I mean, this is all public knowledge. Like, this is a part of my process and a part of the story. And, of course, Ashley, we've told it more than once. I mean, perfectly flawed husband, 27 years old, and things didn't go in my favor. Let's just put it to you that way.
You called the first 3 or 4 years of marriage the messy middle.
It was, yeah. That week did not go my way, and you can read into that. And I left her in the room, in the shower, and went to the bar and got blitzed. So all I knew that I needed to do at that time is that I just got to go make money. Like, I got to go produce. I got this new business. I got to go produce. Well, guess what? A month later, we're like, we don't know if we need to be together. We don't know if this is going to work. Well, guess who she was pregnant with?
Oh, sweetheart over there.
That's right. And 9 months later, sweetheart over there flatlined on the table. Mommy had to be rushed back into the OR because the umbilical cord made its way out before she did and was kinked like a water hose.
Oh.
So she was born a fighter as well. And I remember being outside the OR just bawling my eyes out because I didn't have control, and guys like me love control. It's also an insecurity of ours. Mm-hmm. And so the only thing I could think of at that time was like, okay, well, I've got $12,000 now in healthcare debt because I had an out-of-pocket expense, just a large high-deductible health plan. I've got to go make money, and this is almost 2 years in, and things are dry. And when you're financially stressed, which 80% of Americans, goodness gracious, live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And when you're in that level, that's all I just could dive in because I have such an obsessive mindset.
So you say Ashley helped you find it, that your first 3 or 4 years was the messy middle, and that she helped you figure out who you are. So what advice can you give to someone who doesn't have a companion, who's feeding themselves BS and calling it caviar? How did they ever get started?
How did they get started on just their path of rediscovery and rebirth?
Because you credit her a lot.
I do. And honestly, I was, even though married at the time, I was hiding in plain sight. So even though I was married, I credit her with staying with me. I was divorced 3 times and married 3 times to the same woman, right?
Right.
But if you are out there, what you feel like you're alone on the path, number one, you're never alone. But number 2, or 1A, is every time you look yourself in the mirror, man, woman, I don't care who it is, right? And you feel like you have a need to be reborn in whatever area it is in your life. At that point, it takes one thing, and it's just straight up commitment. Straight up commitment and making the decision. So many of us get stuck where we are, making the decision to move all the BS to the side and then just raising your hand. We live in a world where there's so much resources available to anybody. Hence why I created Psalm in the first place. But until you raise your hand, because we experience this with men all the time in Psalm, whether they're a CEO or bagging groceries or on the oil rig, it doesn't matter. The minute you truly raise your hand and you commit saying, hey, take me through the fire. Like, I don't want to go through this, but I know I have to go through this. That's when I know someone's ready. But it takes commitment to thyself because you just get tired of being tired.
Just raise your hand. You're right.
Just raise your hand and then take the hard step, but do it with someone who has been in your shoes, who is willing to go to battle into the trenches with you. So that's just my thought.
In part 2 of your book, before the break, if you're just coming in, we talked with Cole about his path, how he ended up here, his self-destructive warrior mentality when he was young, of the goal, the expectations he put on himself, and how he met his wife and he broke through that. And it's a good story. It's kind of a AA program a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think a lot of the rules that you put in your book you say in your book, these are not new ideas. It's just all about
Absolutely not.
And it's just the commitment to doing them and the group mentality, which is a lot like AA. But you don't have to be an alcoholic. To go into AA, you have to be an alcoholic. But to begin in school, you have to have a desire to quit drinking.
Well,
that is the number one thing to be in an AA. You have to have a desire to quit drinking. But to be in the school of man, you don't have to have that desire. You just have to have the desire to be a better man.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah,
So,
and you've got to meet a man where he is in his life. Like,
yes, and it could be that.
It could, and we have different levels of Psalm, and we have our 1% Man program, which is for our married businessmen that are looking to scale their business in 10x ways, but looking to have it all and do it the right way, right? To where you might have a man that has to completely reboot everything, right? So that's the power of Psalm, is that we are meeting men where they are in their lives. And the key is, do you want to be a better man by focusing on the things that matter most? If the answer is yes, then you've come to the right place, because we've got that deep bench of men who are going to coach, who are going to guide you, who are going to make you level up just simply because of who they are and the caliber of type of men that they are. They don't just talk about it, they are about it. So, we have and that's what I love, is that you've got in Psalm, it's not just one typecast.
Yeah.
You've got every make and model and creed out there in Psalm.
So do you have gay guys in there?
We don't. Not yet. And that's something that, we, with Psalm, because we're such from an outside looking in, it's funny how
Would a gay guy feel comfortable there?
100%. Yeah.
This is an interesting point. My husband received a postcard for the School of Man about 3 days before you were supposed to. We confirmed your interview here, and I thought the same thing. The novel thing that I think about School of Man that probably attracts a lot of, or that makes it work for straight men, is that gay men kind of have the community and the support system because we make it for ourselves.
That makes sense.
I find that straight men don't do that for themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In the
I
same
didn't
way
even think about that.
Well, and again, it's all society,
Sure.
Expectations, whatever, and there's always exceptions to the rule. But where's the straight man's yoga and wine like women have, or paint, sip and paint and sip, or whatever, or
I don't think gay men are as afraid to talk about their feelings.
Possibly, but
I think that's I didn't even think about that, to be honest with you.
To me, School of Man is a really positive outlet experience that I think straight men just aren't allowed to have, or suppose.
Well, and a lot of times too is that we as men, as straight men in particular, on the alpha side, will find ourselves becoming more and more lonely as we go through life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the truth. And you see it like from our most successful, let's just say most successful on paper, what society considers. Like if you got 3 letters behind a name, CEO, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're making bank, right?
Alone at the top.
It is very much so. Like so like it's because things that we create become another child of ours. And
you are not kidding.
And it's one of those things like when you want to go decentralize your command. And that's the only way School of Man will grow, is that I have to get out of the way and let other men come to the forefront and use their gifts to help better other men too, because this is about me chasing immortality. This is about being here 100+ years. But it's so difficult because when you're in a position of that, and you've built something from the ground up from scratch. And that's what I do really, really well, along with the help of great people. It's like a baby, and it's very hard to give over that baby to someone else, right? But kind of going back to we've had one gay guy that has reached out to us, gay man that has reached out to us, but I hadn't heard back from him, because I think that on the perspective side of things, it's like, man, these guys are, I mean, we're extremely patriotic, right? We're a conservative group for most part, but that they wouldn't be welcoming, and that's furthest from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we are a loving group of men and women, the families are, that we would welcome anybody with open arms.
As long as they're male.
Well,
Women can't come.
Well, no, we've created another program for women called CIS.
But women don't want to come.
Well, no, they don't want to come to some in the mornings or et
the
cetera.
School of Man. The women don't want to come to School of Man.
No. So we created something for women, Strength and Sisterhood, called CIS. That's rolling out in April.
That's good. Well, we'll see if they sign up. So that's coming out in April.
It is. And SOM is a very family-driven organization. So our wives are extremely important, daughters, sons, etc. It's not just a group of ragtag individuals, and it's that where no one's allowed in or able to see behind the doors or the curtain, per se. Does that make sense?
Have you always been a gym rat?
Not necessarily.
Did you have the gym, the CrossFit gym, before you had SOM?
I did. So that was a part of the story, is that once I started getting things together and I started breaking down walls and going to therapy, and I just got tired of being tired, right? But I got also tired of disappointing Ashley.
Well, you said that you read you had a chapter called "What If," and you talk about reading Mark Divine's book called "The Elite Warrior to Lead and Succeed," and that it had a big impact on you.
It did. So
tell us about that.
Yeah, so I've always been an avid reader, and always have fed myself and my mind and my soul just knowledge on how to better myself. Right? But when I walked through Barnes and Noble and I saw the book, it just stood out to me, and it just really stood out to me. And that's what took me down on a different journey. It really helped reinvent who I was. But more importantly, it wasn't words on a page. I actually bought into it, because at that time, I had nowhere else to go.
So what'd you do with the knowledge you learned? Did you go? Is that the book where you went out to took the Navy SEAL?
Yes. So that's a part of it.
So tell our listeners what you did.
Yeah. So that's a part of it. And Ashley was done with me. So I had to reinvent myself. I actually took what I read, because most people don't do this. I took what I read and I applied it immediately. And I started meditating, even though, as weird as that felt, coming from a country boy in Arkansas, like, meditation, really? You know, you start developing these worldviews that are completely false 100%, because that's what you've been raised around. And so I started meditating. I started journaling.
Because Mark Divine's book told you.
Yeah, and I said, well, you know what? If a SEAL's doing this, or if
because he's a Navy SEAL.
Yeah. So if a SEAL is doing this, he's a commander in the SEAL teams. If he's doing this, then by God, I'm going to give it a shot. You know, so that's kind of how my mentality was working. Is like, okay, I need approval, or I need to see somebody else who I consider elite. You know, that's just where I was doing it, to give me permission to do it myself. Right? Because I was, again, dealing with the addiction to validation, so on and so forth, even though things were going really well in my businesses, career, etc. Money was flowing in. Now, I was hitting what we all think about the benchmarks. So that's where I started. And really what catapulted me to do that is that I had an intern, a young man who's still on my team. He's like a little brother to me. I ripped him to shreds.
What does that mean? Yelled at him?
Basically, yeah. So it was, from a mentor coach perspective, he didn't do something that I liked.
And this was in your CrossFit gym?
No, this was in my business, and this is where I'm getting to on the CrossFit side of things. So I ended up, long story short, as I go through this process, and I connect with some guys on the West Coast from the SEAL teams. I started unlocking different chambers in my mind. I came back to Little Rock, bought a CrossFit gym.
But to unlock those, so you didn't have the CrossFit gym yet. So is it called, what's it called, Hell Week?
Yeah.
So Mark Divine has a Hell Week that he puts on?
He does, is to get buds candidates ready.
And you just say, well, I'm just going to go. I read his book. I'm journaling. I'm meditating. And now I'm going to sign up for this Hell Week. It's going to be Navy SEAL stuff for civilians.
It's 100% pretty much identical to Hell Week. Yeah, what they're basically doing is they're taking buds candidates and they're taking crazy guys like me and they're inserting them into a simulation 100% so that the success rate in Hell Week when they go in is increased.
Don't people die doing that?
Well, and that's where I'm going with it. So my swim buddy died at my feet.
At Hell Week?
Mm-hmm. So Kirk died at my feet, and that's when I had the CrossFit gym. And Ashley and I, again, I have kicked everything. I've kicked everything minus the lying to her. I was putting so much cash into the gym because it couldn't even float payroll. And the reason why I bought the gym wasn't to get in CrossFit. I wasn't even in CrossFit at that time. It was to give me a platform to mentor men like me, mentor C-level guys, mentor businessmen through fitness. And that's how I would get into the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual work with them. And so I go to Hell Week. Kirk and I are hooked at the hip. When you're a swim buddy, basically you're partnered up based upon height line. So how tall you are. Well, he and I were considered Smurfs because we're short. And the entire time we were hooked at the hip. You go to the bathroom, he's right there with you. You're in the surf, middle of the night, you're hooked arm to arm. Oh. You're hugging each other. I mean, you're doing anything you can to help your teammate succeed. And it was that fateful night when we were headed up a mountain, middle of the night, I had to give him away to the other team, and it just broke my heart. He comes down the mountain, had seizures, defecated himself, comes to, I get him, I clean him up along with my teammates, and then the last day, we're there. We're one of 9 out of 50 to secure this.
Oh, left in it that are still going.
Mm-hmm. They're still going.
And your teammate who had such a bad night the night before is still in there?
Still going. And then at the very end, when they secure us, he falls right out, right at my feet. Heart gives out. So at that point, that's where the whole dynamic in my life changed. It's funny how God puts certain people in your life. Ashley was there. We're better than we've ever been, so I thought. It's really easy to mistake movement with progress. And so I thought, and she comes running up. Of course, they're holding everybody back. They're trying to do CPR on Kirk. And I'm just standing there. You know, you've been up countless hours. You haven't been asleep. Like you're seeing stuff in the sky, you know, at that point. But I knew that at that point, Kirk, who I'd been with, who I consider a brother, through thick and thin, hell, and high water, literally, in the ocean, he died. I saw men die living in front of me. That's the first time now. I've been through a lot up to that point with family members, but I never had seen somebody go to that level, and he left 2 boys behind and his wife. And some people are going to say, well, that's pretty selfish. Well, if you're standing toe-to-toe with a man who's out there to better himself as a man so his family can get better and he can be the tide that lifts the ship, I'm still talking about him. He's not dead. He's immortal. He saved my life and countless other people's lives. He saved my marriage. And I will never let anybody tell me otherwise. Because at that moment, guess what happened? I come back home and a radio show like this asked me to come on and got my story somehow. I hadn't even told it to anybody. And that was the first time that I told my story in full. Complete vulnerability. Kirk allowed, he liberated me. He gave me permission to liberate myself. I came on a mic like this, all the stuff I talked to in therapy, and told everything. Everything. Knowing that I had a lot to lose. But at that point, I was done. The one person who was listening that never heard it, who had been in therapy with me for over 2 years, was my wife. Because we were doing therapy separately, we'd come together. Kirk's passing catapulted me to truly focus on the things that matter most. Because Because we only have 86,400 seconds, and that 1 second contract can be up at any time. And it brought me to my knees. When I walked off of the air, I get a phone call from my wife. It says, we're done. And I thought I was doing great things. I had just done this incredible thing. I thought that everything was moving in the right direction. Led me back to therapy. J.C. McDaniel, who's a close friend of mine, someone that's heavily involved in Psalm. He just basically knife handed me, and it's in the book. And she's weeping. She's crying on the other end of the couch. I'm on the other end. And we get in the car, and she says, I just don't know what to do with you anymore. I'm done. I'm done. And she's not a quitter. My wife has never once quit on me. She's never once told me that give up on your dreams. She's never once questioned me. But Kirk's death is what catapulted me it forced me to focus on what I was avoiding. On what I was avoiding. I'm making more money than doctors in this town. Thought I was taking care of my family. Zero debt, nicest things, vacations, all that, right? Feeling healthy, feeling good. Physically, I'm past the mental blocks with my Achilles tear. Just did something that very, very few people, less than 1% in this world, will ever do. Kirk passes, and the hardest freaking thing was in front of me at that point. So I go on a search, and I go through just the town here, and there were just, I'm a very results-driven guy. I'm a very non-bullshit kind of guy at this point in my life. Like I'm tired of the rat race. I'm tired of it. I go to a couple men's groups. I tell my story again. They didn't like what I had to say. Like, this guy's too raw. He's too real. He's too in our face about the things that we all deal with. I don't care who you are. And one group in particular looked at me and said, oh, well, they said, this is a great story. And I didn't need their applause, but then they went right back to their book. Mm-hmm. I was like.
So what were you saying that bothered them?
Everything on this show, just coming out about masturbation, coming out about the lying, just being me.
Cheating on your wife?
Yeah, just the whole dynamic of like, this is a little too much for me.
Yeah. Like,
this guy's trying to out us all type of deal.
It's more than just, I need to stop drinking. I need to get
and it
real.
Wasn't. You just need to get real. And it wasn't, and that's the thing is like, I wasn't coming from a bad, like a one step away from what this prison, mm-hmm. right? I had my own that I had built around me, mm-hmm. right? I was just an uncommon guy just coming out there to speak to the men and just say, hey, guys, just raise your hand. Mm-hmm. And that's how Psalm really got its start, because I believe you have to create your own realities.
And you already had your gym by now.
Yeah, I did.
And so you said, I don't fit into this box, and I don't fit into this men's group. I'm going to make my own men's group.
Yep, that produces results.
And so in your book, section 2, you start with the book, chapters 8 through 13, with each person's name to tell their story. Why did you, when you talked about creating Psalm in chapter 2, why did you decide, or section 2, why did you decide to start each chapter with a person's name? Adam, who helped you crystallize your dream. Zach, who made me cry. I can't remember why now, but I remember I cried. And then Rick, I just really hurt for him.
Because it's important that people understand. Well, people love social proof, right? Like, we want to know, we want to hear other people's stories. Like, we want social proof. So for me, it's equally important, if not more important, like I give you the story on Kirk, that all these men have been given a platform, very successful men. Rick, very, very accomplished in the Air Force. Zach, very accomplished in the pharmaceutical industry. Adam, very accomplished in the real estate business. Whatever they do, that's not who they really are. And so that's why it was important to me that these men who were brave enough to put that story out there, get that platform, to help other men liberate themselves.
And I think Rick, who was the one that I hurt for, was abused by, sexually
He
abused
was.
by a lot of people, wasn't he? I mean,
He
that's
was.
a very hard thing to come out and say in a man's group. You know, you said that you have a reoccurring theme throughout your program, being accountable,
Yep.
and that we all wear masks,
Mm-hmm.
and that being vulnerable, which you didn't think was, I think, is the hardest part for you, is admitting weakness and being vulnerable, and
100%.
even crying.
100%.
That you wore a mask to cover those things up.
100%. Yeah, and when you put all those together, when you embrace vulnerability, embrace extreme accountability, and a system to produce true results that your family's going to benefit from and the world's going to benefit from, you become unstoppable. You become blessed and unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
But-
I like this when you said men are meant to battle, and sometimes when there is no war, our warrior spirit will atrophy. It wears on our psyche until we create unnecessary battles for ourselves. And then I read, hold on, I'm going to read you something on page 108. I don't remember what it is I wrote, but oh yeah, here it is. Traits of an unhealthy alpha. If you're listening and you identify with this, you may be an unhealthy alpha. You wrote, honestly, I do not think that a man wakes up one day and says to himself, today is the day I'm going to burn it all down. Instead, throughout the span of his life, or even in a particular season of life, he makes small little decisions that add up over time. He walks into the house and drinks one whiskey, which eventually turns into 3. He starts waking up later. He quits reading. He quits talking to his spouse and goes into his dark corner and begins to hide in plain sight. He wears a mask when he is talking to his buddies. He wears a mask when he makes a sales presentation. He wears a mask when he is talking to his wife. But when he goes to bed is when he really hits him hard. All the fear, anxiety, insecurities flood his mind, and like wrestling an alligator, he tosses and turns with those thoughts until he finally says enough is enough before it's too late. Some people never say enough's enough, though.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your brother's episode and the podcast that you two created together.
The podcast?
We haven't talked about your podcast.
No.
I love the title of it.
Yeah,
Alpha Talk.
Alpha Talk, and it's just
It's free.
It's direct. I mean, I think society's done a very, again, society over, I don't know when it started, we've been too politically correct. Men need to, I go and thank the biggest jackass in my life because that man or that woman.
Makes you feel normal?
Well, no, just that they cared enough about me to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear.
Yeah.
Like when I say jackass, I mean like the person that you just like, they piss you off, but you know they're doing it out of love.
Yeah.
Right? So
Tough love.
Tough love. There you go. So Alpha Talk is just, that's what it is. But it's taking also another opportunity to give my men a platform to take them where they are and tell their story so that the world can listen, who's ever out there listening.
And Tommy Robinson listens.
The what?
Tony Robinson.
Yeah.
He listens.
Yeah. So it's...
I think that's really cool. That for anybody who doesn't know, he's a great inspirational
Yeah, so it's one of those things that
speaker.
It's been fun to see this all play out and evolve. 100%. I mean, it's going to continue to evolve. It's going to continue to grow.
How often do you make an Alpha Talk?
Just kind of depends on the season.
Uh-huh. You got stuff going on. And
yeah,
if you got a lot
so
of
much
energy on stuff.
Yeah, so we've got a lot. Like I've got the next one that's coming out. The 3 hardest words that any man can say is "I love you."
That is so true. My husband won't hardly say it.
It's very hard for us, in particular, to say it when you are to another man in our world.
That's so funny.
And at Rebirth 2.0, that's the whole thing. Is like, because you've got families, your men have been on this path for 2+ years to earn our Phoenix, which stands for Rebirth.
Yep.
And there's so much love there for me to look at another man and say, "I love you, man," and mean it, and not have to have alcohol. And even though we have a big time and party and everything else, there is a connection there that goes back thousands and thousands of years.
My husband has a friend that says "I love you" to him all the time, and it bothers him. He's like, that guy didn't quit telling me he loves me.
No, and I mean, we hang up the phone with each other and say, like Doug Powell out of Albany, Georgia, love you, man.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just when you're in the trenches with people and
love
you
you,
do
man's different. This guy says, I love you.
Yeah.
That's different than love you, man. Life, love, and legacy. Why that title?
It just felt right.
It does.
It just felt, it's so easy for us to exist. It's harder to live. And then we talked about the 3 hardest words for any man to say, I love you. But the greatest gift we can give ourselves is to know thyself and then love thyself. And to me, when I think of love, I have to start with Cole in order for me to give it to anybody else. And I don't mean in the egotistical, narcissistic way. I'm talking about truly embracing why I was created or why I am created, my scars, my pain, all of it, just the beauty of life and loving that. And then from a legacy, many books, thousands of books have been written on, you got to leave a legacy, you got to leave a legacy, you got to leave a legacy. But I'm more about chasing immortality and helping others do the same. And what I mean by that is it's the impact, the wake that you live in the world. You don't have to have millions of followers on Instagram or YouTube. Yeah, that, of course, helps you expand your reach, etc. But for me, my legacy is for my children, for my grandchildren, for my great-grandchildren, for my great-great-grandchildren, etc. And it's based upon one simple ethos that I live by every day. Did I leave the world better than I found it? Mm-hmm. That's just how I live my life. Mm-hmm. And that's honestly how I've always lived my life. But through this journey, this messy thing called life, it's been fun. And that's why I titled it School of Man, A Man's Guide to Living, Loving, and Legacy.
And you talk about your ethos. A man is driven by his why. Mm-hmm. A man runs to the sound of adversity. A man commits to taking action. A man does not make excuses. A man chooses integrity as his value of choice. A man vows to renew his 1-second contract daily. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, I like this one. Yeah. A man is not a shitty teammate. I like that one. A man is a servant leader. A man embraces change. A lot of people have a problem with that. And a man embraces legacy. So in this last section of your book, you talk about the really nuts and bolts of seeking those ethos and following those ethos. You have the Crucible, mm-hmm. 55 consecutive hours of hell. If you sign up for the School of Man, is that what the class is called, the Crucible?
Well, so it's a part of our process. It's a part of the path. Doesn't mean that specifically you're going to go through the 55-hour Crucible. If you want to take that path, so it's
in addition. It's an option.
Yeah, it's an option. So like if that's so how School of Man first started is that we create real brotherhood. We don't create the fake.
You really do.
Yeah, we create real brotherhood that produces real results, and we just have a unique process and curriculum and how we do that. And how that first started, Class 1, the Founding Fathers, the OGs, I'm so grateful for those guys because I put it in front of them and said, hey, and none of us, it was one of those things after I started and launched SOM, and Adam was the first person I mentored, it was kind of interesting how life started presenting these men, as wanting more. Like they would walk up to me and say, hey, man, I don't know what y'all are doing over there by carrying logs downtown Little Rock, and, you're just doing crazy stuff.
Tell our listeners that that's one of the things you have to do is carry a log in downtown
Bear
Little
crawling
Rock.
for a mile.
I was about to say the bear crawl to the Capitol is the thing I keep hearing about.
Yeah, so there's a ton of stuff that we do. And
just humiliate them.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. It's like we built the first curriculum 1.0 in 10 months, and I said, guys, we have to do something to put an exclamation point on this. You're going to go through a Crucible. And they all looked at me because they had never done anything like it. I said, we're going to train like warriors in mind, body, and spirit. Truthfully, we're going to talk about the hardest stuff. Even if you're coming out of place like you're just hitting on all cylinders, cool. Give that energy to another man. And at the very end of this, you're going to go through a Crucible minting your brotherhood. And that's when the first Phoenixes were earned, which were hand-drawn by Jeff Powell. And that's how the Crucible was born. And it's the safest, most impactful event because over 10 months at that time, you get to take, you track men across, it's ultimate life coaching. So now it's one of those things that if a man comes to us and says, hey, I just want to get involved, perfectly fine. you get involved in School of Man University. You get put in a class. Right now, Foxtrot's going on, and it's just to understand our culture. Read the book, listen to the podcast.
Get your battle book.
Yeah, get your battle guide. We need to understand where you need to focus. We want to help you use a rifle, not a shotgun.
Yeah.
Right?
Narrow it down.
Narrow it down. Make it very simple on the things that matter most, because we're going to better you a man if you come in with a hunger emotion, right? And then if you want to go up and you want to accelerate your growth, then you will take that accelerated path, and it goes first phase, second phase, and then third phase. And it's pretty much an 18-month journey to get to the 55-hour Crucible.
If you really want to get
so
there.
we've evolved the whole thing.
And it's physical.
It's on the outside, that's the easiest thing for us to show on video.
Yeah, because when I click on that on your website, it's like watching a military training. These guys are they're going through the water, and I'm like motivated, and I want to get my flag
But what
out.
no one sees is what happens at night. Like the tears, the bonding. You have to use that to get men to a place of vulnerability, and then at that point, you start inserting yourself from a coaching perspective.
That's very military.
So
you break them down physically till they emotionally.
Yeah, and they're not foreign to each other either. Meaning, like, you've been on this path with your teammate, your brother, and you earned that term, brother, for goodness gracious, for over 12 months, close to 18 months.
I gotcha.
You know, you've already done a 12-hour Crucible together. You've already learned all the hard stuff about each other.
Trust.
Lots of trust has already been built. So now
Isn't
at this
there
point,
even something about a sign a non-disclosure agreement?
100%. You will not. I lead with my vulnerability. It's not my place to tell another man's story unless he's given permission. But if you walk into our organization, no matter where you are, England to South Carolina to California, Washington, which we have men across the country in, there is no pillow talk.
Mm-hmm.
There is no conversing what we talk about behind the scenes of Psalm, because there's something happening every day in Psalm, Monday through Sunday. There is a conversation happening every day in Psalm. There are us highlighting each other's successes, but also being there when a man might have to close his business and lay people off.
It's like being a preacher. You have to take all that stuff home, not tell your wife.
You know, and it's a privilege unless you view it as a burden. But at the same time, it's a place for a man to come that he is completely safe, completely open, completely vulnerable, no matter where he is.
So these are some of the things that you get if you join with you. The Crucible, which we just talked about at the end. The Phoenix, Greek mythology bird, which is the experiences of the rebirth. That's like your graduation coin.
Yeah, so that's we call it you finish to begin. You're always finding new starting lines. So once you earn your Phoenix, so like
when you certainly are. You're always starting something new.
Yeah, so like even within Psalm, you know, when you join Psalm, like in April coming up, you get access to School of Money Mindset, School of Man Games, Psalm Fuel for Nutrition, Psalm Fellowship, the Rescue Series. I mean, your wife can get involved in SIS, you know, Strength and Sisterhood. There's always something going on outside Born to Lead, our leadership programs for men, because our whole goal is to better men and equip them on every aspect and every level of life. Mm-hmm. Like even if you want to get into real estate investing, we have courses and classes for that, live training as well as virtual training.
How many employees you have?
That's the cool thing about Psalm.
No employees.
We have 0 employees. Everything is giving back into the organization by these men who believe. I mean, we have tattoos on our body. I don't, but men do, of our Phoenix. It's a pay it forward, reinvest. It's an investor mindset.
How many people is a perfect size class?
That's a good question. So the perfect size group is going to be an 8 to 12 man team. Mm-hmm. Now a class, just like what you see in school, you could have like a 3rd grade class that has 3 classes in it, right? Mm-hmm. Psalm works that way too. So we work always in groups. Like right now we've got 35 new guys that have started since January 1. They're broken up into smaller groups, and each one of those groups have experienced instructors who have been through our training and that hold a Phoenix or in the process of earning their Phoenix.
So if I wanted to come and just do your CrossFit gym, is that possible?
That is possible.
You can just come down there and do the CrossFit gym workout with a bunch of...
Yep.
Just like a normal gym.
That's right.
And then, but if you get in there and you're like, wow, there's something going on here, there's some good energy, what is it? And you start asking about it, you can say, yeah, man, you can get committed and take it.
Our process is there's nothing else like it in regards to the world. We're revolutionizing as people in front of people's eyes, just like what Steve Jobs did with Apple. We're doing that with how men's organizations operate.
Is that why Tony Robinson calls you?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things is that when you produce and you see the true testimonies and we've got a documentary coming out on it at the end of this year, you see just the amount of love and impact, like that we would die for this cause.
Without having to go to war.
Exactly. We would die for this cause, and how much our wives and our family rally around it too. I mean, it's an incredible, it's going to outlast me. That's my whole goal is like, if I were to die today, kind of going back to the 1 second contract, that goes back to Kirk. We have 86,400 seconds in a day. We don't know when that 1 second's going to be up. That's what the 1 second contract stands for in our ethos. Constantly renewing it. It keeps you in the present moment. It keeps you alive, keeps you focused on the things that matter most. My goal here has always been to this outlast me so that my son, Landon, can take advantage of it.
I feel like your goal is kind of like Son Gray was saying, is to find a place for men. They don't have a place like this, where alpha males can feed their warrior spirit without having to join the service and leave their family.
Yeah, and so we have also a lot of veterans that are involved.
I bet you do.
Yeah, and we have a nonprofit leg to School of Man called the School of Man Foundation, 501c3, where we specifically focus on men's mental health and well-being, because over 40% of men deal with depression or deal with anxiety, and that's a low statistic, honestly, from what we've seen. So like we've even got a 2-day retreat coming up just specifically for that, to make it completely badass, to where a man can come and work on his mental game and bring his son with him.
And do you think that's because men won't talk about it?
I think that's a piece of it. I think that, we could spend a whole other episode on that. But yes, I do think that's a piece of it. I think that as great churches are, I think that some churches, and I'm a man that believes in God, I'm a man that believes in Christ. I wasn't always like that. I was raised Catholic and fell out of that relationship until Psalm came around and I started being around men that were doing it the right way. I think churches have honestly hurt men's organizations in some form, some fashion.
How come?
I just think that there is, again, it goes back to, I'm being careful here, but I think
Didn't
it goes.
know you were ever careful.
Yeah. Well, I'm being. I just think that the cultures that have been built aren't completely 100% inviting for you to be able to come to a place to talk about what you need to talk about, but also be equipped with the tools to actually do something about it and produce the desired result that you want. And this isn't me throwing a stone.
I don't think churches can fill the niche you're feeling.
They're
for
not.
Sure.
They're not, and they don't have the bandwidth and or the resources.
And it's so much bigger than religion too.
100%.
It's just every that aspect of of the male experience is everywhere in our world.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm coming down on it. It's
Right.
just when I look at it, I was involved with the 12-week program, phenomenal program called Better Man, and it was hosted by 3 churches and other churches as well. But you look around the room, and this is because I do this. This is why God put me on this earth. And as great as it was, and as great as the pamphlet was, and what they have built, I guarantee you, next year you're going to still see the majority of those men, 99% of them, stuck in the same place.
Still seeking.
Still, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like, I'm a very progress equals happiness guy.
Yeah.
And, it could be that, hey, man, you are spiritually connected to God like no one else I ever know, or however you want to define spirituality, but your health is shit.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you completely, or you're dying in front of your own eyes. You're not taking care of yourself, but yet you're over here, you're over here talking about, like, this is what I want to do, this is what I should do, and you just never do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like, that's just my opinion.
So you wrote this self-help book called School of Man. Why did you decide to do that? Why did you decide? Well, I know you said you like to read, but
About writing the book and authoring the book?
yeah. And then I like this guy you wrote it with, Guy Choate. He wrote, what's the name of the book he wrote? The kid's book?
Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Gas, gas, gas.
Yeah.
So cute. He wrote a kid's book with you, or not with you, but
So I wrote the manuscript, and I brought Guy in to clean it up because
and it became a book.
Yeah, and it became a book. And the reason why I wrote the book and how I see Psalm, because I'm a visionary kind of guy, is that in the halls of Psalm, you're going to have School of Man, a man's guide to mental toughness, School of Man, a man's guide to expanding his wealth and his impact. So you're going to have a series of books like Chicken Soup of the Soul. And then you're going to have a series of personalities that have blossomed out of Psalm, like Keith McCormick, John Vigory, Derek Price, Zach Cox. You know, all these guys we're building platforms for these men to help us expand our impact around the world. There's 3.7 billion men. We've got to get our name out there. But at the end of the day, if it lands in one person's hands and it resonates with that person or that man, and it maybe they've been given the permission to say, my God, I need to liberate myself, right? Like I need to actually raise my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Then our job is done.
I love what you said about yourself at the beginning of the book. I was feeding myself BS and calling it caviar.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to be on a lifelong journey of learning, Cole. To date, which of the things you have learned sticks out in your mind most?
I've never been asked this question, so I love it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, great question. Smooth is fast. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Slow is smooth,
smooth is fast. You can't microwave success.
Oh. Okay.
You can't. Trusting the process is honestly a gift in and of itself. We have been tricked into these little casinos we carry on our hands, our iPhones, right? That you hit a button, and I say it all the time in Psalm, life isn't Amazon Prime. You don't just hit a button and that result shows up at your doorstep a day or two later. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast once you're locked in on your target, and it's the right target. And once you trust the process, that makes that ride a hell of a lot better. The sunrise is a hell of a lot more beautiful, and the sunsets just absolutely blissful. That's what I've learned, is that today it would be easy for me to walk away from Psalm and say, you know what? Got what I needed. I'm out. I need it more than ever.
You never stop needing it, do
no,
you?
and Psalm doesn't produce an iPhone. We are the iPhones. We help upgrade men like they upgrade their iPhones or their golf grips or their hunting or their new shotgun or whatever. But what I've learned is, and just coaching all the men that I've coached from various walks of life, you have to trust the process. You have to trust the process. You've got to take the step on the path, and you have to understand, hey, smooth is fast. Like, you're going to get where you want to go as long as you have a vision of who you are chasing and you're ready to burn that boat and write that letter to that former self. And you truly buy into it and believe in it. And you don't continue to give in to those voices inside your head or the naysayers or the people outside of you out here making fun of you. I can't tell you how many people have made fun of me. Tons, and I'm appreciative of them, that have laughed at me, mocked me. And I don't have a vengeance towards them because I'm so steadfast in who I am. I know where I'm going. I'm in control of my life and the journey that I'm on. Very few people have that type of mindset. And I'm not saying, look at me, but back to that question, it goes back to slow is smooth, smooth is fast, meaning trust the process. Just trust it. Trust it. Don't microwave success. You don't want that.
And stay on track.
Stay on track. And you're going to get off. Your consistency is going to create your own personal credibility.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I see, as the greatest opportunity out there for people.
A question for the listener.
Mm-hmm.
You should call and find out about School of Man if
you're just wanting to become a better man.
Pretty simple.
I mean, it's simple yet profound. Like, it's the easiest question I ask people in a new guy. Do you want to become a better man? Well, yeah, it's a loaded question. Okay. We're going to meet you where you are. If you're in that phase of life to where you've launched businesses, you've created businesses, and you're tired of all the yes men, come to the 1% Man Project.
Why do you care so much?
Why not?
Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is, but it's also an energy boost.
I guess so.
It's a fulfillment, and that kind of goes back to my story. I started learning I achieve everything I want through the path of fulfillment. And I mean, trust me, Ashley's asked me the same question too, multiple times. Like, why do you care so much about someone else's life? Just goes back to once I locked in on why I'm truly here, I will never, ever waste that gift that was given to me.
Lovely. How do you go about applying or getting in touch?
Just first and foremost, find us on social. At the School of Man is the easiest way to start following us and getting involved. Go to schoolofman.live. Take our Battle Guide Challenge. 7-day challenge. It's a free battle guide. It's a badass journal for men. All right.
So now what is that?
So I created the battle guide early on because most men were struggling to create traction in their life and momentum. Sustainable momentum.
Is that free or do you buy that?
No, it's free. And then there's a hard copy you can buy if you want it, but it's free PDF along with a training series that comes with it.
And you just go through that worksheet.
It's 67 pages, and it's going to teach you how to not just journal, but again, use the rifle approach and not the shotgun approach. A lot of guys don't understand what targets they're actually shooting at first, and the most successful, the 1% in the world, know damn well what they're looking at every single day, but also block out all the BS that doesn't get them closer to that goal, but wants to stay in check and make sure their ego doesn't consume them, right? That's why I created the battle guide, because a lot of guys, for me, like, I need something very simple to create momentum in my life. I don't have to do these big grandiose things right out the gate, just like writing a book, or recording a podcast. It doesn't just set the bar to where you're going to trip over it and create momentum, and that's what the battle guide's for. That's the first place to get started.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I want to do it.
Yeah, and you can. And that's the first place to get started.
And you go where to get that?
You can go to the website, schoolofman.live.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah,
That's
schoolofman.live. It's right there. Boom.
Download it.
Yeah, and so we're always offering ways to get involved. I think that's the best and easiest way to do it. Of course, listening to the podcast,
that's
picking
what
up the book.
I was going to say. Don't forget Alpha Talk.
Yeah, don't forget Alpha Talk. Pick up the book. And I will always answer an email, Cole@schoolofman.live. You can always email me. You can always email our support team. But I like mentoring and coaching. We have our full ambassador team of Psalm. So if you do have more interest in learning more, I'll connect you with one of our ambassadors that fits your story. We match guys based upon where they are in their life, right? Mm-hmm. So if I got a guy that is just dealing with self-sabotage and he's maybe had some addiction issues in the past, we're going to put him with a guy that has been there but has been able to conquer it, right? So
yeah, I noticed all the people in your second session was a story of somebody that you could relate to if you were
100%. Relatability is an attribute.
I have loved learning about you. I have loved reading your book. I have loved listening to the Alpha podcast. I was telling you at the break we should do our own show together sometime. I think it'd be fun.
Let's do it.
But I have a gift for you and Ashley. It's a desk set with the North Carolina flag for Ashley.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
You see that child
That
over
is
there?
awesome.
And Arkansas flag, U.S. flag, because you're patriotic.
We
and
are very big
for
patriots in our
Ashley.
family.
Thank
you so much. This has been a blessing.
Oh, I've really enjoyed it. All right. Sorry, I threw my stuff away. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
You're welcome. In closing, to our listeners, thank you for spending time with us. We hope you've heard or learned something that's been inspiring and enlightening, and that whatever it is, will help you up your business, your independence, or your life. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it up.
If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the picture of Kerry's face in the center of the screen. For more of Kerry's interviews, click either video on the right of the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.